Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this video is about Shia-Sunni differences. It's a request from one of my many faithful viewers. So the Sunni and the Shia are the two major denominations of Islam. Now, there are some Muslims who call themselves non-denominational, as in they don't identify with either subset of Muslims, just say that they are Muslims. And there's this misconception that the Shia and the Sunni absolutely abominate each other. Now, it's true there are a few on either side who do feel like that. Often when there's sectarian conflict, it's been for theological reasons, sometimes not, sometimes political, economic and territorial or national causes masquerading behind that. It's a bit like within Christianity, a strife between Catholics and Protestants. And there have been times when Catholics and Protestants have slaughtered each other in huge numbers. There have been times where they've got along absolutely fine and it's really not mattered. Or like take the Northern Ireland conflict, that yes, there was a sectarian aspect to it, but it was more to do with national identity. Anyway, so, the two major branches of Islam, what do they have in common? Well, they would both consider the Prophet Muhammad to be the last and greatest prophet of Islam. And they would obviously read the Quran and the Hadith, with about 62 Hadith, these books of the deeds and utterances of the Prophet Muhammad. And there are some Hadith would be accepted by both denominations, some only by Shia, some only by Sunni, some by certain Sunni but not others, some by certain Shia but not others. It gets extremely complicated. How did the Sunni even get their name? So the Sunni from Sunnah, as in tradition, whereas the Shia, as in they are the adherents of Ali, follower of Ali. So it all goes back to succession issues. Quite often it does. Well, you'll see this with the schism in Christianity. In Islam, it's about who took over after the Prophet Muhammad. His immediate successor, there's agreement about that. It's a couple of generations later. Was it his son-in-law, or was it his grandson? Who should have come next? Because the Khalifa was appointed as the successor to the Prophet Muhammad, or the Caliph, as we often anglicize it. And by the way, there are also Ibadi Muslims, particularly in Oman, who are a separate denomination, neither Sunni nor Shia. They seem to have good relations with both denominations. Saudi Arabia, which is vigorously, perhaps I could say fanatically Sunni country, they maintain amicable relations with Oman. So if anything, could you say they're closer to the Sunni than the Shia? I don't know enough about the Ibadi to say. And then there are other groups which are considered schismatics from Sunni Islam, particularly the Ahmadis. You find them in Pakistan, the less extent in India, and the Druze. But I might talk about the Druze on another occasion. The Druze are not regarded as being Muslims at all by mainstream Muslims. And okay, you'll get some real headbangers, Sunnis or Shias, who will not accept that the other denomination are Muslims whatsoever. Within a few decades of the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Sunni and Shia were fighting each other. And the Shia are a minority in Islam. They're 20%. That's about the highest estimate. 20% of all Muslims being Shia. And Hussein ibn Ali was the leader of the Shia. And he, after his brother Hassan, he was killed at the Battle of Karbala in Iraq in 670 AD. I'll just go by the Christian years, not after Hijrah. Incidentally, you might know that Muslims, they date things from Hijrah, as in the time when Muslims fled from Mecca to Medina because they were unsafe. The idolaters in Medina had it in for them. What else? So, because if you're going to have a system of numbering years, you've got to have an event, count down to the event, and then up to the event. So the Muslims have got before Hijrah, counting down to it, and up after Hijrah. Incidentally, in India, Hijrah means something completely different, a eunuch, not related at all. So the Shia, they'll often commemorate Karbala and in Ashura, as in the 10th month, beating their chests ritualistically, sometimes slashing themselves, whipping themselves, making themselves bleed. In Iraq and Iran, they particularly go in for this. Occasionally in Pakistan, they were doing it, and it was a time of heightened sectarian tension. It became almost like a dance, wailing these poignant tales of what happened to him and the gruesome accounts of his martyrdom, and leading the riderless white horse, obviously with tack, to show that he was killed. It goes on even in Manchester, the United Kingdom. So anyway, the Shia subdivided into how many imam they believe there were, 7 or 12. The 7ers or the 12ers, and then there was a great occultation, as in when the last imam disappeared, and supposedly he'll come back. Now, Sunni Muslims often believe in the Mahdi, as in the purifier who will return. The occultation, I should have said. The Mahdi, he'll return sometime to bring the faith back to its roots. And the most famous example of this was in Sudan in the late 19th century. The Mahdi, the boat builder, I think, who had this sort of gap between his teeth, which he claimed the Prophet Muhammad had also had, and he was thought was a reincarnation of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him. And I won't go into it, but led an insurgency against the Egyptian authorities. Sudan was an extension of Egypt at the time, and he briefly ruled Sudan before dying, and then his Khalifa took over, his successor. But then General Gordon was killed by them. But then the British under Kitchener came in, Battle of Omdurman. They were defeated. That was the end of Mahdiism. Although the Mahdi's great-grandson is still a prominent figure in Sudanese politics to this day. So even though he'd split off from mainstream Sunni Islam, for some reason Sunnis don't seem to regard him as being a heretic. Okay, so as I say, within Shia Islam, there's that divide. And of course there's the Aga Khan. And the Aga Khan is the leader of a certain branch, Ismaili branch of Shia Muslims. So the Shia are divided into several sub-denominations. And there are many people who claim descent from the Prophet Muhammad because he had so many wives. They didn't have that many children with him, actually. But even if he only had 5 children, they all had 5. Keep multiplying that even just by 5. And obviously high-status men tended to have loads of wives. A man can produce limitless children, really. A woman can produce only 1 every 9 months at most, only up to the age of 50 max. Anyway, so the Aga Khan, they moved from Saudi Arabia and eventually to India. And in the late 19th century, the British Raj gave them the title. His Highness recognized them as Aga Khan, numbered them Aga Khan the 1st, 2nd, 3rd. I think we're on Aga Khan the 4th now, who's in his 80s now, though he's born in Kenya, actually. Spends a lot of his time in the United Kingdom, speaks with a British accent. But the Aga Khan dynasty, they've been marrying white women for a few generations. So the current Aga Khan is very pale-skinned. And he was married to a German lady, Dr. someone or other, an academic. I even taught his stepdaughter briefly. But he's divorced from that German woman now, I think. So that's them. You can see an Ismaili mosque, Aga Khan Mosque in London, South Kensington. And they run a lot of charitable foundations, like in Kenya. But the Aga Khan, although he's leader of these Ismaili Muslims, it's quite a small denomination, they tend to be very affluent. And he's not particularly observant. You would not realise he's a Muslim by his dress, his behaviour, and I'm pretty sure he drinks. But they were well known in horse racing circles. And by the way, for even the most puritanical Muslim, horse racing is entirely acceptable, because according to the Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad derived great gratification from watching these quadrupeds race. Nothing wrong with camel racing either. So going back to that hidden imam for the Shia, Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, this is going back to the early 2000s, he was always talking about that, thing was going to happen any time, and when he was addressing the United Nations, he believed that somehow the occultation was ended and the hidden imam was coming to him. For Christians, a bit like the return of Jesus, the second coming, second day Adventists in Christianity, or the Messiah coming back for Jews. I mentioned the Druze, or I'll mention them in passing. It was in 10th century Egypt. It was ruled by a bloke called Abu Hakim, who went walkies one evening in the hills to the west of Cairo and was never seen again. And there was no evidence of a struggle, that was killed by a wild animal or bandits or whatever, or fell off a cliff. So what happened to him? And then a group of people split off Islam, and they're the Druze, and they adulate him, and they think there's an occultation, it's going to come back sometime. And there are 2 sets of Druze, sort of an inner circle and outer circle, have certain levels of knowledge, but Islamic countries won't allow the Druze to call themselves Muslims or to call their place of worship a mosque. They have this 5-pointed star symbol. So the Druze, you'll find them in Lebanon, Syria, Israel. Almost nowhere else has got a large community of Druze. They're a small minority in each of those countries. So Arab Israelis are quite often Druze, and were often counted as separate from being Muslims, even though they regard themselves as being Muslims. Tend to be very liberal within Islam, as in what they consider acceptable for people to do and people to wear. Okay, so distinctions between Islam between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam. Come on to a little bit of the origins of the theology of it. I mean, I'm certainly no scholar of the Quran, as you can probably tell, But roughly speaking, the Shia tend to be more iconographic and the Sunni more iconoclastic. Now, Sunni Islam is enormous. This is hundreds of millions of people, and subdivided into at least 5 major schools of jurisprudence, and there are distinctions within that. There are Deobandi Muslims, and there are Wahhabi Muslims, and there are Sufi Muslims, and there are Salafi Muslims. Some of these groups overlap. I remember in Saudi Arabia as a child, I simply assumed that was a standard for Sunni Islam, but it's not actually. Seeing in India and Pakistan elaborate mausolea for all sorts of famous Muslims, Sunni Muslims too. So Sunni Muslims are going to be against religious hierarchy as such, although they do have sheikhs and scholars and ulemas as council of scholars, but no intermediary between man and God, no priestly caste, that anybody could lead prayer or whatever. And some Sunni Muslims, not the Wahhabi kind, that's the Saudi Arabian kind, they have pir or saints, Sufi saints. They believe in venerating these people, praying at their tombs and so on. They're places of pilgrimage. You particularly find those in India and Pakistan. And the Wahhabis, with this group which emerged in the early 18th century in Saudi Arabia, because of Abdul Wahhab in Riyadh, became very influential, and they briefly took Mecca from the Ottoman Empire and smashed loads of tombs there. And through the 20th century, the Saudi Arabian authorities have demolished almost everything in Mecca and Medina, apart from obviously the Kaaba and the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad. Loads of his followers had their tombs razed to the ground by them, because we know we mustn't have any trace of anything apart from him, because there's a distraction from the Prophet Muhammad and Allah. Otherwise, you're worshipping these tombs. So, whereas Shia Islam has got clergy as such, has got people who are Hujjat ul-Islam, as in a sign, a proof of Islam, that would be the translation, or higher than that, Ayatollah, as in a sign of God. And it comes from the Quran when supposedly Allah is saying, I'll leave you a sign of God. But they take that to mean some sort of religious leaders, and then grand Ayatollah, a bit like bishops and archbishops, something like that. So both are fairly puritanical, but there's a broad spectrum of interpretation of what they consider permissible behaviour. And obviously some people are kind of Muslims in name only. So the Shia are only majority in Iraq, Iran, Bahrain and Azerbaijan. Iran is the most Shia country in the world, about 90% Shia. And Bahrain, although the Shia are a majority, often they have Iranian roots several generations ago, is the Sunni minority that rules the Khalifa family. Obviously their surname actually means successor. In Iraq, they're a slight majority. And obviously they're Arabic-speaking Sunnis, and then they're Shia, so they're Kurdish-speaking Sunnis as well. The Kurds can usually speak Arabic as well. So the Sunni minority, Arabic-speaking Sunni minority, lorded over the others for centuries. And obviously since the liberation of Iraq in 2003, because it's been democracy, the Shia majority have had a fair crack at the whip for the first time in ages. So Azerbaijan, also a Shia country, but it's a very secular country. So about 80% Shia, about 10% Sunni, and there are obviously some Christians as well. Azerbaijan wasn't always Shia. It was conquered by the Persians briefly, who converted them en bloc. Whereas apart from that, the Azerbaijanis are really just the country cousins of the Turks. But the Turks are Sunni Muslim, almost without exception, unless they're actually atheists, because a lot of people are just non-religious in Turkey. Might call themselves Muslim, have a party at Bayram, that's it, for these festivals. And Egypt is a very Sunni country, almost no Shia left there, but it was Shia many centuries ago. And so some famous Shia monuments and tombs are there. That's why the last Shah of Iran chose to be interred there. So there's often been sectarian conflict. You'll see it in Afghanistan, where the Shia minority got a terrible time, massacred by the Taliban, fought back. Obviously they're backed up by the Iranian government, because they speak Dari, which is virtually the same as Farsi, the language of Iran. A sectarian conflict in Iraq and Pakistan, although the Shia are a minority in Pakistan, 20% again tops. The Bhutto family, famously, they are Shia. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, he was Shia, as were a couple of the other prominent leaders there. Let me emphasize, I'm not suggesting that most Sunnis detest most Shia, but some do. The extremists do, the Taliban do, ISIS do. They're violently anti-Shia. And, now in Syria, they're the Alawi, which is a subset of the Shia, and that's what President Bashar al-Assad is. And so he's got all Shia on his side, because ISIS would slaughter them, and all the Christians, and a few of the Sunnis, particularly more moderate ones, and the Druze. So in Saudi Arabia, the government often says we're 100% Sunni, which is a lie. They have a significant Shia minority in the eastern province. The Shia might be 10% of the whole Saudi population. It's difficult to arrive by statistics, and they're severely discriminated against. Not allowed to build more mosques, not allowed to have more graveyards, tend to be very poor, and just don't get government jobs. And everything's reliant on the government there. And a peaceful protest is defined as terrorism. In Saudi Arabia, people will be executed for taking part in it, particularly in places like Caliph. So they're thought to be too fond of Iran. As Dr. Robert Fisk wrote, by some curious coincidence, most of the Middle East in oil is in land where the Shia are the majority. The eastern province of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Iraq, particularly the southern part of Iraq, Iran, to some extent Azerbaijan. Okay, there is oil in non-Shia areas like the UAE and Qatar, but not so much. Qatar, an almost entirely Sunni country, has very warm relations with Iran, a largely Shia country. So it's not the case that they loathe each other. So the Saudi Arabian government is viciously intolerant. See the civil war in Yemen, which is to some extent a sectarian battle. So that's that. There has been enmity sometimes, and you can tell people apart by their names sometimes. Like one of my friends, he's a Sunni, and his name is Omar, and he'd say, you could bet your bottom dollar that I'm a Sunni judging from that name. Or sometimes it's read Umar or Omer in Turkey. So there we are. That's just really barely scratching the surface of some of the denominational distinctions between Sunni and Shia Muslims.